The text message code that my mother and I established when I was young saved me twice. My mother was my everything during my childhood. In 1974, after my mother discovered that my father was having an affair with a colleague, he left my mother and me. In his anger and humiliation, my father physically assaulted my mother, which led her to obtain the house and drive him out of our lives. He is determined to change his life by taking care of other women. So he works in many places like women's shelters. He eventually became a legal consultant and social worker serving bullied women and children. He truly can help people escape the vortex of domestic violence. He knows that society can sometimes be unfriendly to women, and he is a great advocate for them. He knew that growing up was already difficult for girls, so the two of us privately discussed some codes to ensure my safety. He also had a special rule. If I got into trouble, I could call or text him in a special way, and he would come to pick me up without asking questions or punishing me. This way, if I had a problem, I could feel safe calling him. He said he understood that becoming a teenager meant making decisions on my own. Sometimes these decisions might be foolish, but that is a necessary part of everyone's journey. My mother was most concerned about my safety. When I was 11, I spent the night at a friend's house for the first time and felt quite uncomfortable. I wanted to go home, but I didn't want to hurt my friend's feelings. Our code was 2 punctuation marks. If I used 2 punctuation marks at the end of my message, it meant I needed help or wanted to leave, but didn't want the people around me to know. Hey, Mother, hey, your uncle just called. I might need to go pick you up. Let your friends know you have to leave soon. Do you really have to go? Yes, get your things ready. This way, I wouldn't lose face and could shift the responsibility to my mother. I have indeed done this a few times, but not many. I know that I always had this safety net while growing up, even though the neighborhood we lived in was quite safe. It was a small town in the suburbs of the American college town. I am a bit older, so most of my friends are younger kids. My mother is often at the nearby shelter, and they are mostly very easygoing children. I also like to hang around the shelter, where those women talk to me as if I were an adult, which makes me feel quite good. Because compared to my mother, I am probably only half their age. I don't play with rebellious kids and have never done anything worth mentioning before university. 2 years ago, I started attending university and quickly realized how safe my small town was. I graduated early, at just 16 years old, but the university I attended was right next to our town, so I could live at home and drive to school. I have gotten drunk a few times, but my friends and I always made sure to stay safe and never drove under the influence. I attended my first social party, where there were many people doing exciting things, which also left me feeling overwhelmed. In the end, I found a quiet corner where a few people were resting, and I started chatting with a handsome guy who invited me for a drink. At that time, I was a foolish and naive girl. Without thinking, I drank it down. About 10 minutes later, I started to feel very uncomfortable and went to the bathroom. I was holding my phone and could hardly see the screen when Mr. Hat knocked on the door as I was about to text my mother. Can I come home a little later than the curfew on 9999 Street? Absolutely not. I'm coming to pick you up right now. I only felt my vision gradually blur, and then that person managed to open the door and help me out of the bathroom. He checked my phone, saw the message I sent to Mom, and then contemptuously said I was a useless baby. He kicked my thigh and left me sitting alone in the hallway. I knew that night my mom saved me from a dire situation. There was a rule in our code. If an address was written down, it meant it was an emergency. An address meant danger, and he made sure I remembered this. To figure out the address, write it down, and keep it in my phone's notes. So before going to the party, I memorized the address, and that night, he saved me. He wasn't angry with me for drinking or going to those dangerous places. He warned me not to go to places like that. He is just worried now, and I hope I'm okay. That night, he took me to the hospital, where the doctor hooked me up to an IV to help metabolize the medication. I only remember Mom sitting by my bedside, looking relieved, but still very worried. I didn't realize how dangerous that situation could become. However, he knew that, apart from that, I couldn't remember any instances where a password was used. After I woke up, he talked to me and told me about the various dangers that young women face in today's world, and since then, I have been particularly cautious. Last month, my mom passed away due to heart disease. His heart had never been very good, so he had been saving money to get a pacemaker, but he didn't have time. I was heartbroken. I always believed that my mom would be in my life forever, a solid rock ensuring my safety and stability. In my eyes, she would never die. I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to continue my life. After losing this confidant and protector, I don't know how to be on my own. I opened his door, and he wasn't inside. I couldn't help but cry. I know he will never show up again. I texted him, and the phone on the table started ringing. I looked at it, wanting to throw it away, but I would never do that, and I can never do that. He loved that phone. He enjoyed the photos and music stored on it, and he liked playing mobile games. When it was time to sleep, he would sit there watching short clips and funny videos for hours. That phone was his source of entertainment. At that moment, I suddenly had an idea. I remembered the funeral director telling me that I could place something very important to him in the coffin. I decided at that moment to copy all of his data and pictures onto the computer, and then return the phone to him, so that after his death he could play mobile games and watch videos while laughing. I thought this idea was indeed good, and it took away a bit of the sadness in my heart. I know this sounds a bit silly, and I don't know how long he has paid for his phone bill, but I think this is quite good for him. He always jokes about coming back to bother me after death, and I just want to play games and watch videos, so this further strengthens my idea. His funeral was sorrowful, surrounded by his favorite flowers, tiger lily, and bird of paradise. One by one, women came to tell me how much my mom had changed their lives. I thought about how she had touched and helped so many throughout her life. Despite being unable to suppress my sadness, I still feel proud of him, and am very proud to be his daughter. After the wake and memorial service ended, I returned home and sat on my mother's sofa. After the funeral, I opened my phone's ringer for the first time and immediately received notifications for the missed text messages. "I love you too." I stared at my phone. The text message I sent him on the day he died was the last one, so I know this is not a prank number. I once thought it was a joke, but I couldn't think of anyone who would do that. I decided to take this as a message from a kind friend of my mother, who might have shared her number with this friend. "Please don't send me a text message from this number. This is my mother's number, and she just passed away." I waited and saw that the other person was typing. My heart raced to my throat, waiting for this person using my mother's phone number to send me a message back. "I'm here. Can you come see me?" My heart skipped a beat. I didn't notice the first text message. I was too scared. There were 2 periods. I reread the second message, which had an address at the graveyard, and 2 question marks. He must have been buried alive. I called the funeral director, begging him to meet me back at the graveyard. He insisted that it was impossible for him to still be alive, that they hadn't done an autopsy, but he was already dead. I just cried and begged him to look at the message until he finally agreed to meet me and help me figure out what was going on. I personally placed that phone in my mother's coffin, and then they sealed it and buried it in the ground. No one but him could access that phone. He knew that nothing could calm my current feelings, so he called for an urgent excavation. The ground had just been filled in, so it could be quickly dug up. They opened his coffin, and the phone was in his hand, not in the wallet I had placed beside him at that time, and the screen displayed a text message that had not been sent. This message was addressed to me. The first body was discovered the day after I found out that over the past 6 years, the probability of adolescent girls going missing had slightly increased, but most cases were considered runaways, and the pleas of parents for the police to search for their children went unheard. It turned out that the administrator of the public cemetery would monitor the grieving families, tracking the girls, and then kidnapping them on their way home from school. After killing these girls, he buried them in new graves. Then the coffin was placed inside and buried under the watchful eyes of everyone, hiding all evidence of the crime. It was only after discovering his maps and souvenirs that the police provided some answers to those 20 or so families. For me, the most chilling evidence the police found was shown to me reluctantly by a detective at my insistence. It was some photos from my mother's funeral, in which my 13-year-old niece was circled. I know you would ask me about this, so I will tell you. I did receive a text message sent by my mother. It was a week after all the media had calmed down that I began to miss my mother again. This is difficult to do when people are asking you all sorts of questions and calling you a hero. I know I am not a hero, but people don't want to hear my story at all. They think that I saw this evidence before my mother was buried. So, when there was finally someone who could... As I sat down, I turned on one of my mom's favorite horror movies and then sent her a message. I didn't expect anything special to happen. I just felt that this would give me some closure. "I love you, Mom. I miss you so much. No matter where you are now, I hope you are happy." I put down my phone and wiped away the tears streaming down my face. This movie is just as wonderful as the first one you showed me, and feeling these emotions really helps to release the sadness in my heart. When the text message notification rang, I was truly startled. "I love you too, sweetheart. I am very happy." The moment I stepped over the threshold and onto the unstable wooden floor, I felt my whole body trembling. Meanwhile, my friends just kept laughing. They laughed and rushed into the living area of the dilapidated old house, which had been abandoned for many years. The surroundings were filled with peeling wallpaper, floorboards shaped like the 1950s furniture, and old newspaper articles scattered throughout the house, making it feel like stepping into the center of a grave. Everything here was slowly fading away, leaving only the remnants left by those who came before. Now, it was merely a playground of curiosity. I took another step inside, but I still stayed relatively close to the fallen front door. Although I was being cautious, in the end, I still didn't refuse the invitation to come here. Casey, with his fiery red hair, suddenly appeared beside me. I didn't see him come in. I didn't hear his voice either. His sudden appearance startled me, making my body tremble and my heart race to my throat. "Don't be afraid. There really are ghosts, but they can't hurt you," he said softly, his eyes sparkling with mischief. Casey is very confident, and his personality is quite cheerful. I want to be a person like him. The word ghost lingered in the air like an unpleasant smell, which of course didn't exist. But when he mentioned it, it still made the hairs on my arms stand up. I nervously smiled. Just a gesture from him was enough to make my nerves tighten. At that moment, his fingers intertwined with mine, and I widened my eyes, looking at him in surprise. But he just smiled innocently. Then, as I was pulled deeper into the house, I felt the air grow heavier. I was overwhelmed by my own fear and the musky scent of rotting wood, struggling to breathe. Casey let go of my hand and turned her attention to a small trapdoor in the center of the floor. "Sisters," she shouted excitedly. I really wanted to turn around and run. I could see the exit out of the corner of my eye, but somehow my attention was drawn to the trapdoor that was slowly opening. A narrow staircase leads downwards. It is nothing but darkness, and my eyes can see nothing clearly. I swallowed hard. "We should go," I spoke up, but my voice was too timid. Kathy then said that I should take my phone down with me to see if I could find something cool. His evil smile seemed to mock my fear. I wanted to interrupt, but by the time I swallowed my saliva, he had already gone halfway down. Others were giggling near the entrance, and I stood there watching his petite figure being swallowed by the darkness. Just then, I saw that thing. Eyes were right behind him, golden eyes, lurking in the corner, wandering in the darkness. That one beam of light was very striking. "Kathy!" I screamed, and the door closed, causing the girls to jump back. Only I stumbled closer to where there was something inside. I shouted, while frantically trying to open the hatch with my fingers, and everyone else froze. It was just this one time that I gathered the courage. But who closed the door? One person whispered that he was the one who trapped others, and one of them replied in a trembling voice, nervously chuckling. But to me, everything was just noise. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. "Kathy, say something," I shouted as I knocked heavily on the hatch, but all I received in response was silence. Nothing is worse than silence. Even if he screamed, it would prove that something had happened. And now, the situation makes me think the worst. Why hasn't the hatch opened? Why is there no sound from Kathy? I can't pull the door open. I fell backward onto the ground, and my fingers turned red and cracked, bleeding from gripping the wooden hatch too hard. Suddenly, the hatch flew open, and a burst of laughter erupted. Kathy's smile emerged from the darkness, and I widened my eyes in surprise. She was laughing, or rather roaring. "I caught you, sisters." I stared blankly at her face, her words echoing in my mind. I blinked, and the feeling of fear inside me grew stronger. I fell down, but quickly got back up. I was ready to run, adrenaline pumping fiercely to my heart, as he held a small cat with yellow eyes in his arms. Seeing this, I finally regained my composure, and I began to smell that musty odor again. My face started to heat up. I didn't know if I was angry, my face flushed red with embarrassment, or if I was blushing with shame. I really thought Kathy was in some kind of danger until an hour later, when we got off the bus. I still hadn't said a word, while others were laughing so hard it seemed like their ribs might break, and I remained silent. Kathy also kept the same silence as before. The sisters took some old books from the house, and someone took jewelry, while Kathy held a cat. We were sitting at the bus stop waiting to transfer to the animal shelter while also browsing the photos taken in that house. I absent-mindedly looked at the photos on the screen, feeling a mix of emotions.
I still haven't recovered, and among them is a photo of the living area showing torn curtains, worn-out chairs, and a few girls. I noticed a string of blue lights behind them, and each photo looks different. Gold and light yellow intertwine. I raised one eyebrow and leaned in. "What is that?" I asked. At the same time, he slid to another photo. In this photo, the light looks like the shape of a person, sitting in one of the chairs, looking just like a person. One of the girls gasped, and I grabbed the camera, quickly scrolling through the photos. The next photo was of Kathy going down into the basement with that light. A hand formed near the hatch, and I quickly slid past it again. The last image was of Kathy in the basement, before the hatch closed. I immediately noticed those yellow eyes, but until now, I had only seen a smile emerging from another corner of the room. I looked up from the screen at Kathy. She glanced at me, and the same smile was on her lips.